The alleyway was silent for a brief moment. The only sound was the frantic beating of Marcus's heart. His breath came in sharp gasps as he glanced around, realizing they were trapped. The cold air stung his skin, and the distant hum of city traffic felt like a mockery. They were cornered. There was no way out. The narrow alley stretched ahead, but there was nowhere to run. Marcus felt his legs trembling, adrenaline coursing through his body as the realization set in. This was it. They were about to be caught, and all of the secrets they had uncovered, the darkness behind Ashford Technologies, the disappearances, the corruption, would be buried along with them. He turned to Serena, who was now staring at him, her face pale and tense. There was no sign of panic in her eyes, only steely resolve. She had been in situations like this before, but for Marcus, this was his first time truly facing the line between life and death. "Serena, what now?" he asked, his voice tight, almost a whisper. She didn't answer immediately, her eyes darting from side to side, calculating their options. The silence stretched, and then a faint rumble sounded in the distance. Footsteps. No, not footsteps. Boots. Heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. Serena grabbed Marcus's wrist, her grip tight, her nails digging into his skin. "We have to make a choice, Marcus," she said urgently. "We can either surrender and let them take us, or we can fight for the truth. You are in this now. There's no going back." A chill ran down his spine, but it wasn't from the cold. It was the gravity of what she was saying. The truth wasn't just a choice anymore. It was a weapon, and it had the power to either save them or destroy them. Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of it all crushing him. He wasn't sure he had the strength to fight. He wasn't a soldier. He was a janitor. But he had seen things that would destroy Ashford and all the lies it had built. He couldn't let it go. Not now. With a deep breath, he met Serena's eyes, his resolve hardening. "Let's fight," he said, his voice steady. They had no other choice. Serena gave him a nod, pulling him toward a nearby fire escape ladder. "Follow me. We don't have time for anything else." Marcus and Serena rushed up the fire escape, the rusted metal groaning beneath their feet. They moved fast, their bodies tense with fear, the urgency palpable. Every step felt like it could be their last, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The sirens in the distance were growing louder, but who was coming for them? They reached the rooftop, gasping for air, but their brief relief was short-lived. In front of them stood an unmarked black van, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The door slid open, and out stepped two men in suits. The kind of men who had no business being on a rooftop at night. Serena froze, her eyes narrowing. She recognized them immediately. Tyler's men. The men walked toward them with a deliberate pace, their expressions cold and professional. "You are in too deep, Marcus," one of them said, his voice low but firm. "You should have stayed out of this." Marcus felt a rush of panic. They had been cornered again, but there was no escape this time. He turned to Serena, her jaw clenched in defiance. "I warned you," one of the men continued, pulling out a gun and pointing it at Marcus. "We don't like people digging up the truth. It's dangerous." The pressure on Marcus's chest intensified. His breath was shallow, his mind racing. He glanced at Serena, who stood her ground, her eyes locked on the men. Was this it? But just as the man raised his gun, Serena acted. She lunged forward with a surprising swiftness, knocking the gun from his hand. The weapon skidded across the roof. "Move!" Serena shouted to Marcus, pushing him toward the edge of the building. Marcus hesitated, his body frozen with fear. Was she trying to lead them to safety? Or was this a trap? Before he could react, gunfire erupted. A bullet whizzed past his ear, grazing the side of his head. He ducked, his heart pounding. "Run, damn it!" Serena screamed. The men were closing in. There was no time left to think. Marcus scrambled toward the edge of the building. where a rope dangled down the side. It was their only chance. Serena followed closely behind, and together they climbed down the rope with urgency. The gunfire stopped, but the footsteps were still too close. It felt like they were being hunted. They hit the ground hard, stumbling onto the sidewalk below. Tyler's men were still in pursuit. The night had turned into a nightmare they could no longer control. Marcus and Serena sprinted down the street, breath coming in ragged bursts. The air was thick with adrenaline, each step feeling heavier than the last. The men in black suits were still behind them, their footsteps echoing in the still night. It was as if the city itself was conspiring against them, turning every corner into a trap. Marcus's legs burned from the sprint, but he couldn't stop. The truth was too close now, and Victoria's life depended on them finding it. But the farther they ran, the closer they felt to the inevitable. Tyler and his men weren't just after them for the files. They were hunting them, and they weren't going to stop until they were caught. They reached an intersection, and Marcus glanced around wildly, trying to make a decision. They could head into the subway, take an alley, maybe lose them in the crowd, but something told him it was no use. The men knew the city too well. He could almost feel their presence like a shadow behind him. Serena pulled him toward a narrow street, its edges lined with graffiti-covered walls. She didn't hesitate, darting through the alley like a shadow. And Marcus followed her, the fear in his chest tightening with each passing moment. "How do they know we are here?" Marcus gasped, his voice strained. "How are they always on our heels?" Serena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked up, scanning the rooftops. "They've been tracking us since the moment we got the flash drive," she said through clenched teeth. "Tyler's not stupid. He's got eyes everywhere. But they won't expect us to double back." Marcus's mind raced. Double back? Before he could process her words, a dark figure appeared at the alley's end. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting shadows that seemed to stretch across the ground like an enemy's reach. "Get down," Serena hissed, yanking Marcus into the shadows behind a row of dumpsters. Marcus crouched low, his heart hammering in his chest. His pulse surged as he heard the unmistakable sound of boots on concrete, growing louder. Then, the figures appeared. Tyler's men. They were moving fast, scanning the area, their eyes sharp and searching. "They are close, too close," Marcus whispered, panic bubbling up. "Serena, we have to move, now." But Serena didn't respond immediately. She was staring at the men, her mind working at lightning speed. Then, in a flash of determination, she gripped Marcus's arm, pulling him along. "Come on. We are making a break for it." Marcus barely had time to react before Serena led him toward a rusty fire escape ladder. She climbed up quickly, with Marcus following closely behind. They reached the roof in record time, breathless but determined. The sound of the men's pursuit grew more distant, but Marcus knew it wasn't over yet. "We need to move fast," Serena urged, her eyes scanning the cityscape below. The moonlight reflected off the glass buildings, casting long, eerie shadows across the streets. "There's an old building across the way. If we can make it there, we can hide long enough to figure out our next move." Marcus nodded, his mind still racing. They had barely escaped the last confrontation, and now they were headed straight for the lion's den. As they crouched low and moved cautiously across the rooftop, Marcus's thoughts kept going back to what they had uncovered. The files, the illegal dealings, the government corruption, the disappearances. It was all tied to Ashford. And if they didn't expose it soon, Victoria Holt's life would remain in danger, and the truth would be buried forever. But it wasn't just about saving Victoria anymore. It was about exposing a system of lies that had been built on corruption and injustice. Tyler wasn't just a corporate shark. He was a monster, and he wasn't going to stop until everyone involved was silenced. They reached the next rooftop, the distance between the buildings narrow enough to make the leap. Serena glanced back at Marcus, her eyes filled with determination. "We jump on 3. Ready?" Marcus barely had time to nod. He had to trust Serena, and with everything they had uncovered, there was no turning back now. 1, 2, 3. They jumped, landing on the other side with a soft thud, but they didn't have time to catch their breath. The sirens were getting closer. Serena yanked Marcus forward. "We are almost there. Just a few more steps." The door to the building was locked, but Serena had a way in. She pulled out a small device from her bag, a tool that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. She worked it on the door's lock for a few seconds, and with a soft click, the door swung open. The old building was dark and abandoned, its walls covered in layers of dust, but it was their only sanctuary for now. Serena led Marcus down a narrow hallway, her eyes darting around as she checked every corner. The building was empty, its former life a distant memory. But as they reached the back of the building, Marcus froze. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, a cold shiver running through his spine. He could feel it. They were being watched. "Serena." His voice was barely a whisper, his breath quickening. "Do you hear that?" Serena didn't respond immediately. She stopped in her tracks, her hand on Marcus's arm. Slowly, she turned around. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. There, standing at the end of the hallway, was a figure, a familiar figure. "Eric," Marcus whispered. Eric Austin, the man who had disappeared from Ashford Technologies years ago. The man who had known too much. The man who had been silenced. But now, he was standing in front of them, alive. "Eric?" Serena's voice was low, filled with shock. "How are you?" Before she could finish, Eric raised a hand, silencing them both. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, but there was a glimmer of something, determination, in his gaze. "Stay quiet," Eric said, his voice hoarse. "They are coming." They were too close now. Marcus's pulse raced as the sound of footsteps grew louder, and with it, the fear that they had run out of time. The men in suits, Tyler's men, were here, and they weren't going to stop until Marcus and Serena were eliminated. Eric stepped closer, his eyes darting around the hallway. "We don't have much time. There's a secret underground lab beneath this building. It's where they keep the rest of the files." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. The rest of the files? There was more. "Follow me," Eric urged, his voice tense. "If we can get to the lab, we can uncover everything. Everything about Ashford." As Eric led Marcus and Serena toward a hidden staircase at the far end of the hallway, Tyler's men broke through the door. Gunfire erupted, but Eric didn't flinch. "We are not getting out alive unless we get to that lab." Now, the air was thick with danger as Marcus, Serena, and Eric sprinted down the dark hallway of the abandoned building. Footsteps echoed behind them, heavy and deliberate. Tyler's men were closing in, their pursuit relentless. Eric, the one who had helped them uncover the files, now led the way. But his pace was unsteady, his face haggard as he glanced nervously over his shoulder. He was no longer the confident IT guy he had once been at Ashford Technologies. In the past few days, he had become a man on the run, like them. "This way," Eric shouted, his voice full of urgency as he pushed open a rusted door and disappeared into the shadows. Serena followed immediately, her hand tightly gripping Marcus's wrist, pulling him along. They reached a narrow staircase, the creaking metal steps sounding like a countdown to their capture. "We are not getting out of here without this lab, Marcus," Eric said, his voice low and strained. "We need those files. The real ones. The ones Ashford doesn't want anyone to see." Marcus's mind was still spinning from everything that had happened, the revelations, the betrayal, and the constant feeling of being watched. But there was no time to process. They had come this far, and now, it was all or nothing. They descended into the darkness of the old building. The walls felt like they were closing in. The darkness, the oppressive atmosphere making it harder to breathe. Every step they took seemed to echo too loudly, as if the building itself was trying to warn them. "What's in the lab, Eric?" Serena asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. She wasn't about to trust anyone blindly. Not after everything that had happened. Eric didn't hesitate. Everything. The truth. Ashford's darkest secrets. And it's buried deep. Deeper than you can imagine. If we can get to the core system, we can expose them all. Tyler. The government deals. The illegal trafficking. Everything. Marcus felt a chill at the mention of trafficking. That was the part of the files they had only scratched the surface of. The part they had to expose. But the more they knew, the more dangerous it became. The stairs led to a metallic door, one that looked like it had been forgotten for decades. The rusted lock seemed almost too easy to break, but Eric had a way of making things happen. He pulled out a small device, his fingers trembling as he worked quickly. "This won't take long," he muttered, glancing nervously at Serena and Marcus. "Once we are in, we need to grab what we can and get out fast." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from above them. Tyler's men were getting closer. Marcus's heart pounded. This was it. They had no more time. They had to make it to the lab now or never. "Almost done," Eric whispered, sweat dripping down his face as he continued to work the lock. "They've been hiding this from the public for so long. But now we will expose them," Eric said. Finally, there was a click, and the door swung open with an eerie squeak. They entered the underground lab. The room was sterile, white walls, bright fluorescent lights overhead, and rows of computers and storage files. It looked like a place that hadn't seen human activity in years, yet Marcus could feel the weight of something much darker hanging in the air. Miller immediately moved toward a desk at the far end of the room, opening a locked drawer with a small keycard. "This is it," he said, holding up a flash drive, the kind you only saw in high-level operations. He plugged it into a nearby terminal, and the screen blinked to life. As the files began to load, Marcus felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. This was their moment. If they could access these documents, they could finally bring down Ashford. But just as the last file loaded, a loud banging sound came from the hallway. "Get down!" Serena shouted, shoving Marcus behind a nearby stack of old crates. She crouched low beside him, her eyes scanning the room for an exit. But there was no time to escape. They had been found. Gunfire erupted from the hallway. Eric cursed under his breath. "We are trapped." The walls seemed to close in on them. The lights above flickered, and the sound of footsteps grew closer. Tyler's men had found them. Serena looked at Marcus, her face grim. "We can't stay here. We have to finish this now." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. They had the files, but they couldn't just sit there, exposed in the lab. The only way to stop Tyler's men was to act, and they had to act fast. Suddenly, Miller's voice broke through the tension. "There's a secondary exit on the other side. It's a long shot, but it's the only way out." Serena didn't hesitate. She grabbed the flash drive from the terminal and handed it to Marcus. "Take this. I will cover you." The pounding footsteps grew louder, but Serena wasn't backing down. She had already pulled out a small handgun, ready to fight her way out if needed. Marcus took the drive and bolted toward the back of the lab. He had no idea how much time they had left, but he couldn't afford to think. He had to make it out alive. For Victoria, for the truth. Marcus reached the secondary exit, his hands shaking as he gripped the cold handle. The metal door was old, its hinges rusty, but it opened with ease. Outside, the night air was bitterly cold, cutting through his clothes as he stepped into the alleyway. But his sense of relief was short-lived. The alley was blocked by another black SUV, its headlights blinding. He froze. Serena's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Marcus, get out of there, now." But it was too late. Tyler's men were already closing in. Marcus's heart raced as he turned to face the SUV, knowing that they weren't going to let him get away this time. "Get in." A voice from the car shouted, its windows rolling down. Marcus didn't hesitate. There was no escape, but this was their last chance. He had to fight for the truth, for everything they had uncovered. With a deep breath, Marcus ran toward the car. But before he could reach it, the door swung open, and Tyler stepped out. "I knew you couldn't stay away." Tyler's voice was a snake's hiss, full of venom. "But now, Marcus, it's time to end this." Marcus's blood boiled. Tyler's men closed in around him, weapons drawn. Tyler grinned. "You think you are a hero? Do you think anyone will believe you?" Serena's voice cut through the silence again, steady and clear. "They will believe us, Tyler, because the truth doesn't stay buried forever." Just as Tyler's men lunged forward, the sound of sirens filled the air. They weren't alone anymore. The authorities had arrived. "You are finished, Tyler," Marcus said, his voice low, but full of defiance. "You can't hide anymore." The gunfire erupted again as Marcus and Tyler exchanged words. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the truth. The whole city was about to know the dirty secrets of Ashford Technologies. But Tyler's men weren't giving up without a fight. Serena, still crouched behind a pillar, opened fire, her shots echoing in the night. Marcus, clutching the flash drive, didn't move. A dozen figures in black suits surrounded them. The fight for the truth had begun. Marcus and Serena held the truth in their hands, but Tyler's men were closing in, and the police were their only hope for survival. Would the truth ever see the light of day, or would they be silenced forever? The sirens wailed in the distance, but Marcus didn't feel the relief he had hoped for. Tyler wasn't backing down. His men weren't finished. Marcus and Serena stood at the edge of the alley, surrounded by shadows, the weight of the flash drive heavy in Marcus's hand. Tyler hadn't left them any room to breathe. "You are not going anywhere." Tyler's voice was a low growl as he stepped out of the SUV, looking at Marcus like a predator sizing up its prey. He glanced at his men. "Get them." Without hesitation, his goons lunged forward, their hands reaching for guns. But just as Marcus braced for impact, the police sirens grew louder, closer. A black and white police cruiser skidded around the corner, tires screeching. Tyler's men hesitated. The police didn't look like they were here for a casual chat. "Move!" Serena shouted, pulling Marcus toward a narrow side street. She didn't wait for him to react, dragging him along, her eyes scanning the area for a way out. The police cruiser blocked the alleyway, its lights flashing like beacons in the night. The officers got out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Down on the ground," one officer shouted. Marcus's heart raced. For a brief moment, it felt like victory was within reach. The police were here. The truth could finally be revealed, but Tyler wasn't going to give up so easily. With a furious snarl, he stepped forward, his voice booming over the confusion. "These people are criminals. They've been trying to steal from this company." One of the officers hesitated, looking at Tyler's men, but the tension in the air was palpable. Tyler's influence reached far beyond these streets, and now, the line between who was good and who wasn't was blurred. "Serena, what are we doing?" Marcus whispered, his throat dry. "We keep moving," she said, her voice calm but strained. She pulled Marcus down the side street toward a hidden alley. "There's a safe house, a block from here. We are getting out. We can't stop now." The safe house was a run-down building, its exterior worn and aged, far from what Marcus had expected for their last stand. But it didn't matter. What mattered was getting the files to the public. And that meant the police needed to be on their side. Serena glanced around, checking for any sign of a tail. As soon as they reached the front door, she paused, knocking 3 times in quick succession. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with thick glasses and an uncertain smile. "Is it safe?" Serena asked, her eyes searching the street behind her. "It's safe for now," the man said, stepping aside. "But you better explain quickly." Marcus barely registered the old man's words. The only thing on his mind was the flash drive in his pocket. The data that could bring down Ashford Technologies and Tyler Bigham. The company had been playing with fire for years, using people like Victoria as pawns in their scheme, and now it was all unraveling. Inside, the room was dimly lit, filled with dusty shelves lined with old files and equipment. The air smelled musty, as if no one had used this space in years. It wasn't much, but it was a place to breathe. Serena wasted no time. She sat down at a desk in the corner, pulling a laptop from her bag. "We need to get this information out before they can shut us down." Marcus stepped closer, his fingers trembling as he pulled out the flash drive. As he inserted it into the laptop, he couldn't help but glance at Serena. She was typing furiously, but her expression was one of deep concern. "This is it, Marcus," she said softly. "We have got everything we need to take them down, but we can't broadcast it until we have got the right allies in place. Tyler is not going to just roll over." Marcus felt the weight of her words. Tyler wasn't just any corporate head. He had connections, influence, and the ability to make anyone who opposed him disappear. But Marcus wasn't afraid anymore. He couldn't afford to be. The laptop screen flashed with a warning as Serena opened the first set of files. The names, the dates, the government contracts, they were all there. But then, something else caught Marcus's attention. A list of employees, each marked with a red flag. He recognized a few names, people who had gone missing crews, people whose disappearances had been hushed up by Ashford. "Look at this." Marcus's voice trembled as he pointed at the screen. Serena leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "That's not possible. These people are alive." She clicked on one name and then another, but as the files loaded, her face drained of color. "Eric," Serena whispered. "He's on this list." Marcus stared, his heart dropping. Eric, the one who had guided them through this dark labyrinth, had been involved in the cover-up all along. But why? Serena slammed her fist on the desk. This was never about the files. Eric played us all. Marcus's head spun. "No, we trusted him. He knew too much. How could we not have seen this?" Before Serena could respond, a loud crash sounded from the other room. The door to the safe house flew open. A man in a black suit stormed in, gun drawn. "Move," he barked, his eyes locked on Marcus. "You've been digging too deep, and now you are going to pay for it." Serena acted quickly, grabbing the laptop and shoving it into Marcus's hands. "We don't have time. Get out. Go." Marcus didn't question her. He turned and ran, bolting through the back door of the safe house, into the back alley. The man in the black suit shouted behind them, but they didn't stop. Their lives depended on getting to the truth, and they couldn't let this be the end. Marcus and Serena ran as fast as they could through the back alleys, their footsteps echoing in the night. The safe house was no longer an option. Eric had played them, and now, the men from Ashford were closing in. But they still had the flash drive, and that was their key to exposing the entire conspiracy. Serena didn't stop to catch her breath. She led Marcus down side streets, her mind working quickly. They had to find someone who could help them. They had to get this information into the hands of the authorities before it was destroyed. But Marcus wasn't sure who he could trust anymore. Eric, the one person who had helped them all along, had now turned against them. And Victoria, the CEO they had fought to save, was now a target of the people pulling the strings. Just as they turned another corner, a car pulled up beside them, its engine growling in the dark. The windows rolled down, and Marcus's heart skipped a beat. That same man they ran away from. His face was impassive as he leaned across the seat. "Get in." "You can't keep running forever, Marcus." Serena hesitated, but Marcus pulled her away. "We are not getting in your car. You think we are going to trust you after everything that's happened?" The man smirked. "You don't have a choice. The truth's already out there, Marcus. Whether you like it or not, you will never make it without me." Serena's hand tightened around Marcus's wrist, and she pulled him back. We are doing this on our own. But the man wasn't done yet. Fine, he said, leaning back in his seat. But you will never make it through this alive. The police will never believe you. The system has been rigged from the start. Before they could react, gunshots rang out. The sound of gunfire echoed through the alley as Serena ducked, pulling Marcus down with her. We need to move now, she whispered, her voice tense as they scrambled for cover. The unknown men from Ashford were right behind them. Serena and Marcus had no choice but to keep running. Serena's eyes darted around, scanning for a way out. Marcus, you have to trust me now. We are not running anymore. We are going to bring them down, once and for all. Marcus didn't know what to say. He didn't know if he believed her. They had already lost everything. But the truth was still inside the flash drive. The conspiracy had to be exposed. Where do we go from here? Marcus asked, his voice raw. We make one last stand, Serena said, determination in her eyes. The final confrontation was coming. Tyler's men wouldn't let them walk away unscathed. But they weren't going to back down now. They had the truth. As gunfire rang out behind them, Marcus and Serena had nowhere to run. The unknown men from Ashford were closing in. They were relentless. Who would get to the truth first? The sound of gunfire ricocheted off the buildings, and the air was thick with tension as Marcus and Serena ducked into another alley. Tyler's men weren't far behind. The narrow space was cluttered with abandoned crates, the dim light barely cutting through the darkness. Marcus could feel the weight of everything pressing in on him. The truth in his pocket, the danger closing in, and the choices that seemed to grow more impossible with every step. We don't have much time, Serena said between gasps, her eyes scanning the area, looking for their next move. She was sweating now, her grip on Marcus's wrist firm, but even she looked uncertain. We need to get to the news station. If we can't get the information out, it will be too late. Marcus was still processing everything. It felt like he had been running for days, unable to catch his breath. But he didn't hesitate. The truth had to be revealed. They couldn't let Tyler win, not after everything they had uncovered. There's an old press office a few blocks down, Serena continued, her voice low but urgent. It's a safe house. I believe they will help us. One of the men from Ashford broke through the chaos, distant but growing louder as they closed in. You think you can just walk away? His words were clipped, almost mocking. You are not getting out alive. Marcus's stomach twisted with fear. They had to make it to that press office. If they didn't, they wouldn't have a chance to expose Ashford Technologies and the dark web they had been hiding. As they rounded a corner, Serena pulled him behind a stack of crates. Stay low. Don't make a sound. Marcus held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest as they listened to the footsteps approaching. Those men were getting closer, their voices muffled but unmistakable. Suddenly, Serena's phone buzzed in her pocket, but she didn't reach for it. She glanced at Marcus with wide eyes, then motioned for him to follow. They had to move. But before they could take another step, a shadowed figure appeared at the end of the alley. A man in black, with a sleek black suit and sunglasses that reflected the dim light. He was fast, too fast, like he had been waiting for them. Not so fast, Serena. Marcus, the man said in a smooth, cold voice. Tyler's men had finally caught up. Marcus's heart stopped as the man in black stepped forward, blocking their path. His eyes glinted with an icy determination. You have been digging where you shouldn't. Serena didn't flinch. She stepped in front of Marcus, blocking him from view. You have been in this game for too long, Eric, she said, her voice steady but sharp. We are not playing by your rules anymore. Eric chuckled, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You think you are in control? The truth has a price, Serena. He shifted slightly, revealing a small device tucked in his coat pocket. Marcus's blood ran cold. Eric had turned on them. You don't get to walk away from this, Eric said, his tone calm but final. You will never see the truth. No one does. Not without consequences. Serena stood her ground, her body tense. You know you've already lost, Eric. There's nowhere left to hide. The truth is coming for all of you, and it will destroy everything. Marcus took a step forward, his voice trembling but full of fire. We've seen enough. We have the files. Your game ends now. Eric's eyes flickered briefly, but then his smirk returned. You think this ends with you? You are more of a pawn than you know, Marcus. His hand moved to the device in his pocket, but Serena reacted in a flash. Get down, Serena shouted, shoving Marcus to the ground just as a loud explosion rang out. The force of the blast threw them both to the ground. The alleyway erupted in chaos, smoke filling the air as the ground beneath them shook. Marcus's ears rang as the world spun around him. He barely registered Serena's hands on his shoulders, pulling him to his feet. We need to move, now. Serena's voice was urgent, her grip firm. She pushed him forward, leading him out of the alley and into the maze of back streets. Marcus's head was spinning. He couldn't think straight. The explosion had rocked him to his core, but they had to keep moving. The unknown Ashford men were right behind them, and now Eric was going to stop at nothing to make sure they didn't get out alive. They rounded the corner of the building and ran down an old service road, desperately trying to lose their pursuers. The flash drive was still in Marcus's pocket. It held the truth, everything they needed to bring down Ashford Technologies. But time was running out. They needed to get to that press office, to get the information out before it was too late. The press office was in sight. A small, nondescript building, tucked away in a quiet part of town. The kind of place no one would think to look if they were after someone. It had served as a lifeline for reporters and whistleblowers in the past, and tonight, it was their only hope. As Marcus and Serena approached the door, a familiar figure stepped into the doorway. Serena, Marcus, you have made it. It was Agent Lacey, the reporter they had contacted earlier in their search for the truth. She was standing tall, her eyes scanning the street nervously. The unknown Ashford men weren't far behind. Lacey, we don't have much time, Serena said, her voice tense. We need to get the files out, now. Lacey nodded. I've been waiting for this. But you are not safe here. You need to come inside quickly. Without another word, they rushed into the press office, and Lacey locked the door behind them. Inside, the room was dimly lit, but there was a small desk at the far end, with a computer and a file cabinet. Lacey quickly moved to the desk, pulling out a few files and loading them onto the computer. Serena and Marcus stood in the corner, catching their breath. The explosion had rattled them, but they couldn't stop now. They had come too far. We have the evidence, Marcus said, his voice steady but low. We have everything, but we need your help to expose it. Lacey looked up from the computer, her face serious. I know what you have, but this isn't just about Ashford anymore. There are people who will do anything to silence you, to silence us. It's bigger than Ashford. This goes to the top, Marcus. This is about power, control, and corruption at the highest level. Marcus felt a chill run through him. Bigger than Ashford? He had no idea what that meant, but before he could respond, the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway froze them all in place. They weren't alone. Lacey's face went pale. They are here. They have found us. Marcus's heart sank. They were trapped. We have to move now, Serena said, grabbing Marcus's arm. She yanked him toward the back door of the press office, but as they reached it, a loud bang echoed through the walls. The door was blocked. Get ready, Lacey whispered, her hands moving quickly to the keyboard. Ready for what? Marcus asked, his voice tense. The walls began to shake as the sound of gunshots rang out from the other side of the door. Serena pulled Marcus down behind the desk, her gun drawn, her face set in determination. They couldn't run anymore. This was it. The truth would be revealed, but only if they survived. The gunfire echoed in the room, and the walls around them vibrated from the intensity of each shot. Marcus and Serena crouched behind the desk, their hearts pounding in their chests. Lacey was already preparing the files to upload to the public news channels. "We can't hold out here forever," Serena said, her voice strained. "We need to get the files out, and fast." The door rattled violently as more shots rang out, each one pushing them further into the dark corner of the office. But Serena wasn't afraid. She had come too far, and so had Marcus. There was no turning back. Lacey was typing quickly, pulling up the press release files. "I'm ready," she said, her voice low but full of purpose. Suddenly, the door burst open with a loud crash. The unknown Ashford men stormed in, weapons drawn, their eyes cold and focused. "Stop right there." One of them pointed his gun at Marcus, a deadly gleam in his eyes. "You are not going anywhere." Serena didn't hesitate. She aimed and shot. The bullet grazed the man's arm, sending him back. Gunfire erupted again. Marcus's hands shook as he clutched the flash drive. This was the moment. The truth was in their hands. But could they make it out alive? Would they survive long enough to expose the entire conspiracy? The shootout continued, the sound of gunfire and shouting filling the air. Serena and Marcus were fighting for their lives, but the odds were stacked against them. The unknown Ashford men had the upper hand. They were trained, well armed, and they weren't about to let them escape. But Serena wasn't done yet. She had one last card to play. "Get down," she shouted to Marcus. Before Marcus could react, Serena grabbed the flash drive and threw it across the room. "Take it," she shouted. "Expose them." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Serena had made the ultimate sacrifice. The final gunshot echoed in the room as Serena's body fell to the floor. One of those men had taken his shot. The room fell into an eerie silence, the sound of Marcus's heartbeat ringing in his ears. He was alone now, but the fight wasn't over. The truth was still out there. Would he get it out in time? The room was silent, save for the sound of Marcus's heartbeat, pounding in his ears. The gunshot had echoed in the air, and Serena was lying motionless on the floor, her eyes closed. Marcus's world seemed to come to a screeching halt. He didn't know how long he stood there, frozen, his mind racing with confusion, horror, and disbelief. Serena had sacrificed herself. She had thrown the flash drive across the room and bought him a moment. But now it was up to him. He could hear the sounds of footsteps, the murmurs of those men advancing. He couldn't waste any more time. The flash drive was the key. Marcus forced his legs to move, his body feeling as though it were made of stone. He crawled toward the flash drive. Each inch felt like a battle. He had to get the information out. With a trembling hand, he picked up the drive, clutching it tightly in his fist. His eyes flickered toward Serena, and for a fleeting moment, guilt washed over him. She had given everything for this moment, and he couldn't let it be in vain. Without looking back, Marcus stood and moved toward the desk, where the computer was still powered on. He plugged in the flash drive and breathed in deeply as the system began to load. The familiar screen flickered, a few lines of text flashing in front of him before the files appeared. "Marcus, no matter what happens, we trust you," Lacey had said earlier, but now the gravity of her words hit him like a punch. They trusted him. He needed to expose everything. Ashford Technologies, the corruption, the government deals, the disappearances. It had to be revealed. It was no longer just about him, or Serena, or even Victoria. It was about justice. It was about exposing the people who had built their empire on the suffering of others. His fingers danced over the keyboard as the documents loaded. It was all there: bribery, money laundering, illegal government contracts, disappearances. It was all connected. Names, dates, locations. He could see the magnitude of it now, the web of lies and manipulation stretching far beyond what he had ever imagined. But something stood out. A file, buried deep within the data, labeled Final Deal. He clicked on it. The file opened, revealing detailed instructions for a massive cover-up. They were planning to erase all traces of the illegal dealings, destroy every record, and silence anyone who had witnessed the operations. But then, Marcus's eyes widened. The final page of the document held something that stopped his breath. Victoria Holt's name. The shock hit him like a ton of bricks. But not because of her involvement. No, Victoria was listed as a target, the one who had to be eliminated. There were detailed notes about silencing her permanently, once the company's dirty secrets had been exposed. She wasn't a part of the conspiracy. She was its victim. The very same woman who had been fighting to bring down Ashford's corruption, the woman who had been standing in his corner, trusting him when nobody else would, was now in their crosshairs. Marcus's heart pounded. He'd been trying to protect her, to shield her from this nightmare. But now it was clear. She had no idea just how far the company was willing to go to protect their empire. They weren't just trying to ruin her. They were willing to kill her to keep everything hidden. His mind raced. He had to act. He couldn't just sit back and let them get away with it. Victoria had risked so much for the company, for him, and now it was his turn to fight for her, to save her. Marcus clenched his fists, his jaw tightening with resolve. He was going to save her. It didn't matter who was coming after him, or how deep the conspiracy ran. He wasn't going to let them take her down. As the screen loaded more documents, his thoughts were already moving toward the next step. This wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about getting Victoria to safety. He had seen enough. He didn't need to know more to know that Victoria was not part of this. She was the one trying to stop it all. Now it was up to him to finish what she had started. Suddenly, the door to the press office crashed open. Marcus spun around, panic flashing across his face. The men were here. "Marcus, you've gone too far," one of the men growled. Stepping into the room with a gun drawn, he was wearing a black suit, his face unreadable. "You should have stayed out of this." Marcus's heart raced. He needed to think fast. There was no way out of the office, and no way out of this mess. The only thing left was the information in front of him. He couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. With a deep breath, Marcus made his decision. He grabbed the computer mouse and clicked the button, sending the entire file. Every piece of evidence. Directly to a secure server. "You won't win, Marcus," the man sneered, stepping closer. "You are not getting out of here." But Marcus wasn't listening. He stood tall, his eyes locked on the man with determination. "I'm not going to let you get away with this," he said, his voice steady, despite the fear twisting in his gut. "The truth is already out. You can't stop it." The man lunged toward him, but before he could grab him, Marcus heard a voice from the doorway. "That's enough." It was Lacey, standing in the doorway with a gun drawn, her eyes fierce. She had called for backup. It wasn't just those men who were after him anymore. It was the authorities. "You are under arrest." Lacey's voice was firm as she walked into the room, her gun aimed directly at the men. "This is over." The men hesitated, confusion flickering across their faces. But it was too late. The authorities had already surrounded the building, and they had no place left to run. Marcus looked over at Lacey, gratitude flooding through him. She had kept her word. The truth had been revealed. And now, it was only a matter of time before the full scope of the conspiracy came to light. Lacey gave him a nod, her eyes softening. "It's over, Marcus. You did it. You exposed them. You brought the truth to the surface." Marcus exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his body. He had done it. He had fought for what was right. And now, he was going to make sure that no one would ever have to live in the shadows again. He stepped back, and as the authorities took the men into custody, Marcus's eyes fell on the screen, the file that held the evidence. The truth was there for the world to see, and with that, the empire of Ashford Technologies began to crumble. The days following the collapse of Ashford Technologies were a blur. The story broke on the evening news. The world watched as Victoria Holt, the CEO, was cleared of any involvement in the corruption. Despite the widespread scandal and the arrest of dozens of executives, It became clear that she had been fighting against the system all along. Marcus's heart skipped as he saw the footage of her, shaking and distraught, but still standing strong, her reputation still intact, though the company she built had crumbled around her. Marcus felt a sense of numbness wash over him as he watched the news coverage. His actions had shaken the very foundation of Ashford, and now everything was changing. The corrupt empire that had hidden behind the Ashford name was no more, but it came at a devastating cost, one that Marcus could never escape. He had become a hero to some, but to others, he was still the janitor. The man who had risked everything to expose the truth and protect the woman who had trusted him. The ones who had once looked down on him, dismissing him as a nobody, were now forced to acknowledge him as a symbol of courage and integrity. But it didn't matter what they thought. What mattered was Victoria's safety, and the fact that she was no longer a pawn in the hands of corrupt businessmen and politicians. The truth had been brought to light, and justice had been served. But the cost of that truth had been high. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering Serena, the woman who had risked her life for the truth. She didn't make it out. He had never been able to look at the events of that night without thinking of her last words. Her final act of courage had cost her life. She had given everything to make sure Marcus and Victoria would be safe, to make sure the conspiracy would be exposed. Serena had fought for them, fought for justice, but in the end, the system she had tried to dismantle had claimed her. Her sacrifice was not forgotten. Weeks passed, and Marcus found himself facing the consequences of his actions. The company had fallen, and the media hailed him as a whistleblower, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had saved Victoria, but Serena was gone, and that loss felt like a weight he could never shed. Marcus had been offered a position with a new company, a company that valued transparency, honesty, and integrity. It wasn't just about the money or the title. It was about continuing Serena's fight. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He had become a symbol of resistance, of standing up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against him. But as he looked out over the city, Marcus realized that while the truth had been exposed and justice had been served, there were still consequences to face. The company's collapse had thrown the world into chaos. But Marcus didn't feel victorious. There was no satisfaction in seeing the empire crumble, only the knowledge that it had cost far too much. Victoria was free now, and the company was gone. But Marcus had no illusions about how fragile it all was. They had taken down Ashford Technologies, but the fight wasn't over. There were still forces out there, still people willing to protect their secrets, still those who would stop at nothing to make sure the truth remained hidden. As Marcus sat in his apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on him, he thought of Serena and the fight she had waged for them. He thought of the moment she had handed him that crucial piece of evidence, the one that had started everything. Serena had believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. She had given him the courage to stand up, to speak the truth, and though she wasn't here to see the final outcome, he had done it for her too. The city stretched out before him, alive, changing, but still just as unforgiving. He had fought, he had risked everything, and he had come out the other side. There were scars, some physical, others deep inside, but he had fought for what mattered. The fight for the truth was hard, but it was worth it. Marcus wasn't sure what the future held, or if the weight of everything would ever fully lift. But as he sat there, reflecting on everything he had done, one truth remained clear. He had made a difference. He had exposed the lies, stood against corruption, and fought for those who had been forgotten. It didn't matter who he had been before this. The man he had become was stronger, more certain, more alive than he had ever been. And as he looked out over the city one last time, Marcus felt peace settle over him. The fight for justice had been long, and it had been costly, but it had been worth it. Serena's sacrifice had been worth it. Victoria's freedom was worth it. The truth had been brought to light, and no one could take that away. There would be no more battles for Marcus. No more running. He had done what he set out to do. He had fought for what was right, and in doing so, he had found a strength he never knew he had. The truth was out, and for the first time, Marcus could finally breathe easy, knowing that the fight was over. There would be no more darkness, no more lies. He had won. Get ready. Your next favorite story drops soon. If this one caught your attention, stick around on RiseVerse Stories. The stakes get higher, the secrets darker, and the drama deeper. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new release. If something shocked or moved you, drop a comment and share what hooked you. Your support helps RiseVerse Stories grow.